Bobby.
Good morning, everybody. How are you all today?
Good. How are you?
Christine and I are the only two with the big old glasses. How come you boys don't have glasses? Is there some issues with that?
Look, coming soon. Good to see you, Farzana. Good to see you, Alan, as well. Christine, the whole 9 yards. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Yeah, I'm going to give it just a couple minutes. I think the recording is going to start automatically now. So welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you here. We'll give it just 2 more minutes so we can get a few more folks to join before we get started so that they don't miss the intro. Okay, well, I'm going to get started with a quick intro about the SCC while folks are joining, and then I'll pass it over and we can get started with the presentation. But thank you all so much for being here. We're so glad to have you all here. This is our last episode of this edition of Canna Talk, highlighting the cannabis pharmacy curriculum. So this is a really special episode. We're so thrilled to have Dr. Kennedy here with us discussing a really vital topic on policy that I know a lot of members have questions about. So we're so happy to have you here, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Christine. Glad to be here.
For anyone who is new to the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, we are a nonprofit organization that offers a private membership as well as education courses. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit that was founded in 1999. We love to share scientific research and clinical evidence. We're really passionate about developing practice standards, providing continuing education, as well as defending and expanding clinicians' rights to discuss medical cannabis with their patients. We are really proud to have members in over 30 different countries, and we hope that if you're interested in joining, you'll take a look at our website to see if it would be a good fit for you. One of the really vital things that we offer is a support network for members. So if you decide to join, you will get access to our private online community where you'll be able to access a directory of all the members. You'll be able to access a private feed where you can post questions, you can share announcements or events, you can contact any of the members and chat privately. It's a really great space because we have clinicians that are really new to medical cannabis, as well as clinicians who have been practicing for decades. So there's a really nice spectrum of physicians, as well as an array of different healthcare professionals, as well as students and veterans that are in the organization. So if you're interested in joining, you would get a discount on all of our education courses, free access to all of our events and presentations, as well as listing on the practitioner map if you are a physician or healthcare professional who would like to be listed so that patients can find you. As you might know, we launched a clinical training curriculum last year that has 23 hours of courses. So 23 modules, each are about 1 hour. These cover really the basics of cannabinoid medicine, from the pharmacology, the endocannabinoid system, laboratory analysis, all the way to specific medical conditions. These were developed all by SCC members who are expert clinicians and researchers in the field. Anyone is open to purchase these, but really they were created with the lens for clinicians to take when they're starting their journey on cannabis education, so that they can really learn how to form the best treatment plan, how to work with their patients, as well as keep up with the evolving research that's changing so quickly. We do now offer 5 CME credits for the 5 basics courses. So if you're interested in that, looking for some credits for the year, go to our website, cannabisclinicians.org, and you can click on the courses tab and access all the information. What we're going to be discussing today is part of our new cannabis pharmacy curriculum. So this was developed with the co-directors, Dr. Alan O and Dr. Bobby Vincent, who will be hosting this episode that you'll shortly meet. We have 4 courses in this curriculum, and these courses do come with 4 CPE credits. If you're interested, you can also purchase the courses individually or as a package without the credits. But we are really happy to be able to offer those credits for you all. So I will stop talking now so that we can get started with the presentation. Thank you all so much for being here. I'll pass it off to you, Alan and Bobby.
Thanks, Justine. So welcome, guys. You guys pretty much know me and Bobby, so I'm going to let Farzana introduce herself, and go ahead.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me this morning. I'm really looking forward to spending this hour and discussing some of the things in the module and beyond that. So thank you again for having me. I'm Farzana Kennedy. I'm from Virginia. I have been in the medical cannabis industry since 2015, and I'm a background as a pharmacist. I have owned and operated a compounding pharmacy for over 20 years, and love the cannabis industry, love the medical part of how it's evolving. And I'm also participating with the program that University of Maryland offers currently for the master's program. I'll be finishing that up this May. So I'm really looking forward to being here and discussing this module and spending some time with Alan and Bobby.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about our module that you created, Cannabis Policy, the impacts on the healthcare environment. And just as a precursor to this, I mean, this module and these 4 modules are created with pharmacist audience in mind. However, I think a lot of healthcare practitioners can benefit from seeing the nuances that we experience. Bobby and I and you have worked with medical patients directly on the ground floor. So it's a little bit of a different environment than per se like a clinical setting. So Bobby, can you give us a quick refresher on what this module is about?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. Welcome once again, as Alan was sharing. So federal and state policies affect the complete patient experience spectrum, from the clinicians that provide care all the way down to the products that are consumed. So oftentimes these cannabis policies are written with meaningful intentions, but as we all know, the translation to the patient care sometimes is absent or obscure. So there seems to be a delicate balance that is existing between policy enforcement of those policies and then ultimately the impacts on patient outcomes. And that's where we get to come in. So thank you, Farzana, for, of course, getting this all together, kind of collecting your experience in the policy world and operating different, of course, cannabis facilities. But in your own words, tell me about what makes this module so unique and special for you, and why is this information so important to get to the pharmacy community?
Thanks, Bobby. I wish something like this was available when I first entered the market, right? When I first had interest in finding out medical cannabis as this, especially when it came to Virginia. And I think that it's important to have the basic understanding of that's what we have done with these modules, is that the basic understanding of what are some of the hurdles that we have to overcome. And that includes patients, practitioners, caregivers, everybody that's actually participating with the program. So I thought this would be a great way to start somebody to have a basic idea of things to look for, how to get involved, and what are some of the important things if you're a pharmacist, and if you have, especially if you're not practicing in a cannabis space, but you are seeing patients in your own practices, that there are some things, and then pharmacists who are practicing in the cannabis space, also some of the hurdles that they will be or they are dealing with in terms of policy, how that impacts how they can practice as a pharmacist, what can be said, what can be done. There are regulations all over the place in the state, so keeping up with all of that, because they are not the same, makes a big difference. So I think this is a great way to get started if you're starting in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, and I mean, the overarching theme in our discussion today is going to revolve around fragmentation of state-by-state cannabis programs and regulations. So in your working experience, what's the most frustrating part in navigating these conversations?
Gosh, and that's the thing, like, I have had the opportunity to participate in different states and deal with patients in different states, and there's different ways that we have to really impact our patients' healthcare at that point. Some states don't have, pharmacists or clinicians requirement in their dispensaries at the end results, but some states do, and those are great, because then you as a pharmacist or a clinician can do what you do the best. You manage your patients. But when it comes to the states that don't, the frustrating part is really training your staff that are not, don't have a real clinical background. They may have science background, you find the best, but they don't have the real clinical background. And when it comes to our patients, it's not just about products, it's also about who the patient is, what they're on, what are their other comorbidities that we're looking at, and how do we refer those, and how do we make sure that safety is center of our concern. So that's at the level of actually when you are working with patients at the level of dispensary. That's the frustration that I have seen with even people, and even on the other side, people that don't come from those backgrounds, they have to administer, they have to be able to relay this type of information with the patient. That can be frustrating for them as well.
I agree. And just kind of hopping into this conversation about the ever-evolving information when it comes to policy in the cannabis world, a perfect example of this ever-evolving information is that as we look at this slide, which was published just a few months ago while we were pulling together this module, since then, Maryland, Missouri, and Rhode Island have all come to also join the adult use markets. So with new states adding these adult use programs and offering increased access to cannabis products for patients, how have medical programs changed? And what is your outlook on medical programs in these states that also have adult use programs?
So, I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of times I hear people say, well, when the adult use program come in, the medical program is going to die, right? That's the first thing that your general public, even my colleagues in other states, are asking. Like, how do we build this medical program and it's going to sustain at some point, even the adult use market comes in? And I think that in the long run, I see medical program being sustained if we have the right structure, right? If we have the clinicians that need it, the pharmacists in place, physicians that are actually there, or if it's more than physicians that are able to manage the patients, like your nurse practitioners and PAs, which is allowed in Virginia. I think just like any other medicine. So I think that we may see a drop in some states when it comes from the industry level. So are the producers or the license holders going to be producing less product availability for medical versus when it goes recreational? So I think that I'm seeing in some states where they are really making sure that medical product stays and that access to the medical products are available for the patients to a certain degree, because it would be hard for patients to switch back to a adult use, dosage form or something like that when they are really needing a medical product. So I think my outlook in the future, I think, we might see a drop, But I am really looking forward to regulatory aspects to come in and regulatory stakeholders to come in and make the medical program more stable and sustainable.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, remaining optimistic is really hard, especially for healthcare practitioners, because it does seem when adult use programs, like I'm in New Jersey, and there's been a lot of struggles with the medical patients not getting the proper access. They're getting kind of left behind in the trail of the adult use because the consumer base is just that much more prominent. So yeah, remaining optimistic. That's one of my key points for 2023. So many of the macro questions about cannabis legalization revolve around which government entity will be responsible for overseeing cannabis and cannabis programs. So from a federal discussion, cannabis has been suggested to be overseen and treated like a pharmaceutical item under the FDA. Or conversely, like alcohol, which is regulated by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF. Without going into too much detail from the federal perspective, can you describe how even within states, the governing bodies have an influence on how medical or adult use programs launch?
Gosh, I will, refer back to medical, adult use will come, and when we have seen the states come with medical, and then right behind it would be adults. But what I'm seeing lately in some states, that they have gotten to the point of medical programs that are so medical, they're so defined. And it's kind of great to see that they're actually defining dosage forms. They're actually defining extraction methods that needs to be there, people that needs to be in this space. So I think that in terms of like how the states are going to be doing that, I think and one other thing I really want to add is that I have seen USP monograph that just, was released in September and had 90 days open window for the monograph for commenting, for the analytical testing and so forth, the quality. So there are stakeholders, there are clinical science-based concern is being noticed and being discussed, and there are regulatory bodies that are there. There are a lot of white papers out there that are guiding our policymakers and our locals and federal level. And I think those things are great. Seeing that research bill has passed, that will open up a path for us. It's definitely, we're going to have to wait and see how that goes. It's going to take some time, but it's a real evolving industry. It's a really evolving medical, and without the quality and the concern of safety, and if the states are going to regulate them and keep them that way, if that's how our federal will come through, if that happens, then we really need to have a medical focused program, because that's what the federal is going to want to do. So that's just my perspective. That's what I'm seeing. I think that more and more focus is coming to some of the different states that are getting into medical right now, that are really focusing on medical. They're bringing GMP, they're referencing a pharmaceutical product. They're actually addressing excipients that are FDA approved to be used and no other product added. I mean, it's getting there. So, we just have to wait and see how the adult programs, as the states, launch, how they're going to be structured.
Agree with you. And I feel like one of the important things that you mentioned during that portion is about these standards and the quality that we're so used to. So as pharmacists and healthcare professionals, we do expect that certain level of quality control, labeling standards, and pretty much streamlined conversations for patient care. But in your own opinion, based on your experience working in these markets, what do you think is the ideal path to be able to communicate these style benefits to the patient and how we can ultimately continue to care for them?
Gosh, clinical care is so important. I have seen patients in my dispensaries and processing facilities that that are making products and so forth, and getting that to the patient. It's so important for quality control. I cannot emphasize that. And not having a standards, even from testing, and no harmonization is there, among us, even within our own states, and forget about, internationally, we're not there yet. But I know it's been talked about. I know USP has released quite a bit of information recently. They are developing monographs based on the products that are available, that are pharmaceutical right now. They are developing standards for, patients needs to feel comfortable. Patient needs to trust. I think we need to really get our, community of clinician pharmacists together to bring this, earn that trust that in cannabis, that it has some therapeutic values that under the care of clinicians and pharmacists, and that they could benefit from, along with their other treatments. But I think it's difficult at this point, it's difficult for patients to find that space, because we're all over the place. Like you said, Bobby, like our labeling, our testing are so different. So especially if when they move to a different states, they really struggle with that.
I'm going to interrupt and pop on really quickly, just to remind the audience that if you look to the right side of the video, you'll see attendees in the chat, so you can toggle between the two. If you have questions anytime throughout the presentation, go ahead and list them in the chat, and then we'll address them at the end. If you see a wheel where your chat is not loading, just go ahead and refresh your browser page, and that usually takes care of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. So diving in a little bit to the core substance of this module, we describe how patient care and general medical care is affected by national and state implemented policies. So there's infinite tangents that we can go through. And honestly, this conversation could be probably 2-3 hours if we really wanted to. But one or two highlights that you'd like the audience to take away from these that really stuck out in your mind as something important, that message to get that out there to other pharmacists that are interested or currently working in the space, or other healthcare clinicians?
I think it's, my biggest message always have been that educate yourself, because it's coming, it's here. If you're in a state, especially if you have both adult and medical market, it's so important to follow the policies. Who's making the decisions? Are you there? Is your voice heard? Because I think that we're a biggest advocate of our patients. We're not, we want the safety. We're concerned about the public health. And we want to work with the states. We want to work with the organizations. We want to work with the regulatory bodies to make sure that that voice is heard. And also that when you are practicing in a place that's, cannabis is federally legal, how does that affect your license and your practice, and is there insurance that covering yourself? That's going to help you if there was anything negative at some point. So I think the biggest thing in a one sentence would be beware what's happening. This is something that we cannot no longer turn our face the other way. It's there. Even if you don't have a cannabis interest, you're going to see patients taking cannabis and coming to your pharmacy and your hospitals and whatnot. That's what we have. Most states will have a PMP that you can access and see. It's going to be really important to be aware of drug-drug interactions, drug disease interactions, whatnot, the dose, all of that. So people are going to be asking more and more questions. So from this module, I think it's really important to understand. That's why this module it's a very basic, but it's pretty broad for us to, if you're trying to get in, there's some of the aspect. And I think policies are so important, because if we're not at the table, we'll be menu. So, so anything that you think that your state's not doing or needs to be done that could use your help or your expertise, or you need to reach out to your colleagues, I think it's very important to educate our policymakers about the medical part of it and patient safety and the all the disparities that we have in the cannabis space, and how that affects us when we get into it and when we practice, and ultimately affects our patient safety. So I think it's important I would highlight from this, basically policy, like get involved, so know how that's happening, besides your clinical expertise, that you can definitely look into and learn, but it's so changing so much, and being on top of it is very important.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, Bobby, I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to add in my perspective from that. Is like, that's one of the biggest adjustments that I had to kind of make while entering this industry. In school, we're taught the traditional medical paradigm of doctor, patient, pharmacy. Like, that's the traditional flow of how medicine is supposed to be. And we're expected to kind of conform to this system that already exists. Whereas cannabis, we're building out from the ground up. So it allows us a great opportunity to advocate for the changes that we want to see. And pharmacists are not used to that. So they don't know how to get involved. They don't know how to speak with regulators and policymakers. So that was a huge kind of shift in mindset that I had to adjust to in approaching a lot of the sensitive topics that we want. And, at the end of the day, patient care is what we are about. So bringing that to the table is kind of the forefront of the conversation.
And I will add to that, Alan, I think the great way when I first started, and I was able to get into Virginia with medical cannabis, and I had the opportunity to work with Virginia Pharmacists Association, and we were able to launch Academy of Medical Cannabis. And that, at least that got attention of pharmacists. Okay. So we had it, we were able to bring speakers, we were able to do a couple things. And I think that organizations within the states are very open to that. So partnering with your, pharmacy, if that's a pharmacy, it could be a nurses association. I'm working with a couple of those. So it's just that we are all in it together. This affects the whole system. And in return, it affects our patient care. So I think we all understand what needs to happen, or where we should be going with this in order to make it a safe environment for our patients. So I think we're all in it together. So if there's an organization that sticks out, I think it's great to get involved.
Agreed. I definitely agree with both of you all mentioning that idea of advocating and getting your voice out there. As they shared, there's not a lot of pharmacists in that space, but of course, all those patients or all those people who are trained with the idea of caring for the patient, putting the patient first, and ensuring that patient care interaction. So getting more people out there that can, of course, voice this opinion and make sure that that's built into these policies as the cannabis industry continues to grow is something that I think will be ultimately a win for the full patient population. We're kind of talking about some of these wins in the policy world. We put up a slide here about Ryan's Law, which you do get a brief chance to cover in your module. Yeah. So for those who may not know, Ryan's Law was introduced in 2021 and was huge for the acceptance of medical cannabis in California. Many of the problems of continuing medical care happen because cannabis is prohibited in many inpatient settings. So can you tell us a little bit more about Ryan's Law, the implications it assumes for end-of-life care, and why allowing them to come into the cannabis industry is something that is ultimately a win for the patient?
I think Ryan's Law is a great example of what needs to happen in the states, especially when a patient at the end of life is looking for relief, and that's what was about Ryan's Law. And I'm not any expert by any means on Ryan's Law, but what I understand is that Ryan's Law allows for patients that are terminally ill to be able to take their cannabis. Medical cannabis products and be able to partake that in a setting, except for like a addiction clinic or something like that. But they can take it in, and I think they don't allow smoking flowers, so it could be something else. So Ryan's Law was established and passed for the fact that Ryan suffered for a little while he was going through that until they got him to approve to use that medical cannabis during his time. And his dad definitely went with it after Ryan passed to take it to the next level and made sure that it was recognized. And just to go away from that and give you an example of my experience with, I have had physicians, organizations that work for like a, hospital organizations, big chains, whatnot. They have real restriction from participating even for their own patient for cannabis. And so that's health system is a big challenge for even patients that are receiving, treatments that they could benefit from cannabis. So let alone somebody who is getting to be, admitted to an institution that where they're going to be staying until they pass, not be able to use that. So that's a space that needs a lot of work and needs to be recognized. And I think advocating for end of life treatment with cannabis, along with their other treatment, can be something that needs to be talked about in every state, because we have that in every state. There are patients who are in hospice and end of life, and they tend to not be able to take it. My most recent experience would be patients that brought medical cannabis to a mental health institute, and they were confiscated. And this was a registered patient with the state, registered program medication and all of that. They could not store a Schedule I drug in their facility, so they had to discard. And so we can see those type of things happening. So education is important. Policymaking, again, is very important. And I think we're the biggest advocate, again, for our patients. So.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great summary. So much to look forward to, and I see some West Coast participants in the audience, so I know they're listening in really intently. With, I'd love to hear from them eventually to see what is happening in California if we have time at the end of this. So moving to the pharmacist role specifically, medical cannabis programs across state lines usually come with different requirements. So either a pharmacist or healthcare professional is required on site, or in most cases, they're not. Currently, there's at least 8 states that require pharmacists. So how do we recognize and objectively demonstrate the value of having these pharmacists there, or any healthcare professional for that matter, on site as it pertains to increased patient care?
I think that's $1 million question. How do we do that? I have seen states that I think it comes from our own organizations and our own unity. What I have seen when a program is getting ready to be legislatively approved, there are stakeholders at the table. And if our organizations are not there, good luck with that. So that's how we get slipped away. I'm in a state currently that everything is there. It's so medical, it's so pharmaceutical grade product, everything, but the pharmacists are not at the table because there are hesitation from different organizations to participate in the program, and that cut the pharmacist out. And I think the physicians didn't realize that, but that now they're realizing it and they're hesitant. They're like, how do I send my patients over and who do I talk to? So I think again, and pharmacists that are in states, at what level are they involved? Are they just there as a pharmacist, one body, and just overseeing, or are they really involved in patient care? So depending on where we are, what states, but it's very important for organizations to recognize clinical aspect of this. If we're going to say cannabis is medicine, then we need to be able to have pharmacists, doctors, patient involved, just like any other practice. And even if it's an unregulated, federally unregulated market, we just need to be able to provide that support for our patients. So yeah, I would say if a state coming in, and legislation is in process, I highly encourage my colleagues to get involved. That's just not pharmacists, but clinicians all together. nurses, doctors, physicians, whoever, and of course pharmacists to get involved and try to be part of that program.
Agreed. Very similar to what you're saying. We've seen the situations where pharmacists may have been introduced. There may be an idea where they would like to get involved, but there has been a lot of reservations. So that's why I think it's so important to have these style events. I hope these style events are helping to peel back some of the curtains and show that there is not much of a taboo when it comes to cannabis as a medicine. And you as a healthcare professional can get involved, can become knowledgeable, and then ultimately can make sure that you care for these patients. So very excited for this program as it continues to grow in these multiple states. Kind of staying in line with that, as we round out the discussion today, it's important to touch on the complex issues that we are still faced on a daily basis. So when we look at rules, regulations, and policies, they're created with good intentions in mind, but it also opens up the door to loose interpretations of the technicalities and loopholes. So one prime and very prominent example is the emergence of synthetic cannabinoids. Can you explain what's happening around the country and touch on why enforcement and regulation of hemp-derived cannabinoids is so difficult with the new emergence of, like we said, synthetic cannabinoids?
So I'm glad we're talking a little bit about that, because recently I'm sure you guys have seen FDA released an article or statement that they may be regulating CBD industry. That was in January 3rd by this year sometime. It could be the second or third quarter of this year, and that's coming with USP. Monograph and so forth that's in place, and this is covers the whole thing of food and CBD in food and drinks, and also as supplements. I think that it's very complex because of the 2018 Farm Bill that practically makes everything pretty much okay with hemp 0.3%. So, and its derivatives and other things. So we have seen a rise in Delta 8. We have seen a rise in other cannabinoids and so forth. So I think my most recent experience is I was actually at a hemp seminar. And after this actual seminar, as we're sitting down around a round table of people having some food to eat, I had a gentleman approach me and handed me a big bar of chocolate. And that chocolate, I took it and I looked at it. It was 120 milligram of Delta 8 in the whole bar. And that was just mind-boggling for me that because of the 0.3%, allowing of THC that just people just makes a bigger thing. So there's a lot in there. So I think that I'm looking forward to actually seeing some regulatory bodies coming in and talking about how this market needs to be regulated, because it is a quite an unregulated market in a regulated Farm Bill. So I think that we're seeing products in vape shops, in small shops, gas stations, everywhere. And I know that it will continue to be something else when Delta 8 is regulated. So I think that it's definitely is a complex space to be in and looking at that. But I think the regulation is to follow soon. At least that's what we have been watching lately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that leads us to kind of our next and last conversation about policy reform. The cannabis industry touches on so many different facets of consideration. It serves as a pharmaceutical item, but with quote unquote no recognized medical value due to Schedule I status. It serves as an agricultural crop under the hemp bill. And then we also have to recognize that the field war on drugs has continually put countless numbers of people in prison for something that almost the majority of people in the United States can purchase legally today. It causes a huge conundrum of these, almost an ethical issue at some point. And there's obviously many varying opinions and conflicts that will arise when discussing anything related to policy. But what are the takeaway points that you can kind of give our audience to bring home, especially as this relates to cannabis and specifically patient care, because this is what our target audience is?
Yes, and thank you, Ellen. I think the takeaway from our conversation here and this module again would be patient care, just like you said. And there are so many things that happened while this cannabis market opened up as a medical option. And there are research. There are more research now, or we have access to more supporting research that we can rely on to at least guide our patients. And again, I'm going to make this clear that I am not saying that any research will pinpoint at this point to say this is for this condition. We need to make sure how we actually talk to our patients. So we know that, there are 20 conditions that are approved in such state. And I think it just assists or alleviates some of the symptoms or assist with them to provide some relief of those symptoms that patients are experiencing. When it comes to regulatory part, we have to make sure that we understand what's happening in our state so we can guide our patients properly. And keeping up with what's happening altogether, like FDA, USP, research, states that are mandating, like a cannabis should be treated as a pharmaceutical, requiring higher standards. Those are kind of a starting point for us right now, to at least, take those and run with it. Because if there is a state wanting to look at cannabis and wanting to understand and have those type of regulation in place, I think that's elevating where cannabis has been. I think there's a start of some sort of a process there at this point. And I'm seeing that in some states. It's making me excited. But, we still have a lot of ways to go. I know that USP has FAQs that they release and they update, and they're very big on analytical testing and having those standardized process in place to have a product that's going to be safe and avoid adverse reactions and avoid public health issues. So I think takeaways would be to keep up with what's happening really, and how to embrace what's in the state. And really, there's a lot sometimes we can't do that we want to in a state for our patients, but doing the best, having the intention of providing and really advocating over and over, even through those, complex policies and issues that we have on our plate.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I was going to say some of the things that I can mirror that I'm also excited about. Speaking about things about the NIH's new research grants that they're starting to pass out in partnership with NIDA. I'm starting to look at some of the national conversations, whichever way it does go, just the idea that there is now a national conversation about cannabis. That's something that's very interesting, and just seeing what comes down the pipeline about that. And then I know you're kind of familiar with this area as well in this space. But as we look towards the South and some of the more conservative states getting into the cannabis arena, they're definitely starting to rely more heavily on the medical aspects and components of the plant, and looking, of course, to pharmacists to be able to support that. So I think there's a lot on the horizon as we get into 2023. But in your own words, as we begin to wrap up, what are you personally excited about for the cannabis industry this upcoming year?
Gosh, I'm really excited for, many things. I saw the research bill. I saw there's the stakeholders that are really important that are actually talking, and there's behind the scene, a lot of committees are formed and talked about our testing methods, talked about our process, and talking about, how cannabis is medicine and how that can, recognizing that from where the plant comes and how we take that and make medication out of it, like even recognizing that and improvement that being propose to make sure that that's more consistent, right? That's what we want. We want consistency. We want product. We want, even from going back to, and I'm really involved with the standards right now with the cultivation and coming into a hemp industry from that perspective, as well as medical cannabis. And cultivation and standardization is so important, and understanding those aspects is really exciting. I think in next 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of positive changes. Now it's hard to tell which way it's going to swing, descheduling, rescheduling, or, both. And there's going to be different space for different of those. But I think there's a lot of talks going on, and that's very important that we have stirred the pot. And I'll go back and say, try to be part of it somewhere, because I think we bring in a lot of knowledge and expertise in terms of patient safety and patient care when it comes to that, because that's the model that we're used to work with.
That's great. But Bobby, I know you have to drop off soon, so I'll handle some of the Q&A with the audience, and feel free to drop off. But it's great seeing you, Bobby.
Great seeing you all as well. Thank you for everything. This has been a great series. Farzana, always good to see you. Thanks for talking, you guys. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. So Farzana, going back to federal legalization, do you think this is actually going to help or harm the medical use of cannabis by opening up state lines and making products that can actually participate in interstate commerce and interstate, trafficking?
That's a big question again, Alan, because we have built this $10 billion industry, right? Cannabis, and that's going to be a big hurdle, right? Overcoming an FDA regulating the whole market. I think there have to be some compromisation among stakeholders to not wipe out what's been built. But how is that going to happen? I have no idea. I'm excited, and I'm waiting to see which way it goes. Every time I think it's going this way, it always goes the other way. So I'm hesitant to say. But yes, if it's rescheduled, of course, you look at, is it going to move all the medical cannabis or cannabis marijuana to a pharmaceutical grade? Then what happens to the market that are there for adult use markets? What happened to that? Would that go back to hemp production, produced products that are going to be available for like a supplement or whatnot? So those are all the questions that we all have. How is this going to be navigated? Or would federalization still give opportunity for the state to regulate? So I think that's the big thing that we are seeing some stakeholders talking about, states to keep it. That's why it's so important for the state to have highest quality, standards, to be able to say, we can take care of this, we can manage it with your guidance, we got this. And that's why I think we need to be involved so that can happen.
Yeah, and I was going to say, in my opinion, consolidation is almost inevitable at that point.
Yeah.
You can move products across state line, which begs the question, like you and I both have backgrounds from independent pharmacies and really advocating for the mom and pop shops. So there's going to be a certain amount of pushback from smaller operators and people who may be only operating in 1 or 2 states versus like the Curaleafs and other MSOs. But I think they're going to have the biggest voice when it comes to what happens on the federal level. And, we've seen that with a lot of the, U.S. Cannabis Council, UCC, that was one of the most recently formed groups. The question of how close are we, that's anyone's guess.
Yeah, it's as good as yours. So yeah, that's the guess we all have. Yeah.
So Wade asks to discuss the role of healthcare professionals in educating lawmakers and regulators. Naturally, I want to say scientists and politicians rarely collide, and when they do, it's usually not the way that either side wants to hear. But how do you think we can do a better job of that? Approaching
I think that it's important to get started. My motto always been, once that I know who has, so I practice in in a town that people knew me, trusted me, had that relationship. So if I went and talked to my lawmakers, they would listen. But I think building relationship and having that trust built, somebody that they could turn to. I think it's so important to reach out to your, if you're a constituent of someone that you can build a relationship with, that's the best way to start, and that's where you begin. You don't go somewhere that no one knows and then you get turned off, because it's just hard to take. You have expertise, you want to share it, and nobody wants to hear it. That hurts. So I always think it starts in your own town, own city, wherever you work or wherever you live, that if we can make connection, if we can be at the table, if we can bring our thoughts and our concerns to them, they will listen for sure. And I have had that experience, and I'll continue to build that even today. So I like that. That's how I approach.
Yeah, great answer. I can't agree more with you. This one is kind of in our ballpark too, about compounding, right? Like I have compounding experience as well, and the conversations I've had with a lot of compounding pharmacists is really interesting, because we're used to ordering singular APIs from Mediska and all of these other compounding sources, but obviously THC is off the table when it comes to compounding. But what about the other hemp-derived cannabinoids? Like, how does that look from the pharmacy perspective? I know CBD was actually available as an API item for a short time, and then suddenly disappeared without any kind of mention of why or when it would come back, or if it would come back. But can you kind of touch on that and your views, since you still run your compounding pharmacy as well? When can we expect to see hemp-derived cannabinoids in a compounding pharmacy?
So that's interesting you said that, because there are hemp organizations or processors in that sense that are GMP facilities right now. They're preparing for exactly that. And so it's just matter of proving and going through the process of FDA approval of that API. And I could not speak to that. That's not my expertise to say how they could legally get that, and then pharmacies to be able to, personalize that medicine as needed basis. So yeah, the API that we had Alan, you just referred to, that was actually not from cannabis plants. So it was a CBD from a different botanical. And even then that was yanked. So it's all matter of time. I think that compounders will have access to, especially hemp-derived CBD, but there are a handful of processors right now that are gearing up to provide APIs to pharmaceutical grade manufacturing companies. And I would think they would be our source if it gets approved and when.
Yeah, and that's really exciting, because it keeps it within the pharmacy realm of needing to follow the right procedures, but it also allows the flexibility of customized ratios of cannabinoids, as well as just that keeping the pharmacist in the conversation. So that's really
and I just want to add to that there are people that are really tuned to the regulation, tuned to be the best of the best, because when this market does get regulated further, it would be the best of the best that's going to be able to be there still and provide the support for rest of the population with their products. And I think there are a handful of those are really gearing up for that. That's good to see.
Yeah. There's a question in the comments about peyote, and I'm not sure if you're dabbling in psychedelics at all. But psychedelics follows the similar kind of pathway that cannabis did. I would say psychedelics right now is about 5 years where cannabis was 5 years ago. So same story, right? A Schedule I substance that has been really inhibited by government policies. And now we're seeing it pop up state by state legislation, making exemptions, as well as decriminalizing the use and carrying it. So it may not be in your expertise, but do you have any kind of thoughts on where the psychedelics market is going to go in the US?
I think psychedelics, in my mind, definitely not doing a lot of research and in this space of psychedelic. But from what I keep up with is I see more research on psychedelics. I know practitioners have better support on psychedelics for a longer period of time than practitioners that supported cannabis. And I think it's more pharmaceutical motivated path that it's moving towards. So yeah, states are allowing it, but I think pharmaceutical industry is looking at it hard for psychedelics.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're just about time. So, Christine, I'm actually gonna ask you to wrap us up with any kind of last comments from the SCC, if that's cool with you.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Farzana. Thank you, Alan. This was such a wonderful discussion and presentation. And thank you, everyone who joined. There was so much engagement in the chat as well. So just so you all know, this recording will be accessible to all SCC members, and you'll be able to see the chat too. So you can see what were some of the comments and the participation. But yeah, we're so happy to wrap up this episode, this series of Canna Talk Pharmacy Edition with this wonderful talk. So really thank you so much, Farzana, and to all of the authors who contributed to this curriculum. It really is the first of its kind, and I really hope it does bridge the gap for so many pharmacists who are entering the field, who have so many questions about where to go after learning some initial theoretical knowledge. Really, how do they apply that to patients? I think this curriculum really addresses hands-on tools and really gives clinicians such a wonderful overview about where the field is right now. And it's changing so much all the time. So thank you all for being a part of our community, for being a part of the society. We're so happy to grow with you in this evolving field. So if you're not an SCC member and you're curious about joining to be involved more, go to our website, cannabisclinicians.org. You can click on join and see we have multiple tier options available, so anyone's welcome. We really want to have a global community where everyone's welcome to come and join and share their expertise, whether you're a patient, you're a clinician, you're an advocate. We welcome everyone. So thank you all so much for being here. We are getting started in January 2023, planning some new webinar series for you all. So stay tuned for the event announcements, and hope you all have a wonderful start to your new year.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone.